Last week we had a little bit of a contest. I had one of these as a giveaway. This is a Theo wheel. If you don't know about it, go check out last week's video. And also make sure that you leave a comment, hashtag, give me that wheel on last week's video for your chance to win one. I'll be announcing the winners via my Instagram account. If you're not following me, click the link in the description down below to do so. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Theory in the DAW. My name is Garden Sound and this is my wonderful parrot Lila. And here we are, back in the studio for episode number 6. Put you up here. You're getting way too curious. There you go. Curiosity killed the bird. Can you believe it that we're already halfway over with this series? I've enjoyed making this more than a lot of my other series that I've enjoyed making. And I'm really looking forward to getting through the rest of these episodes. This is gonna be a 10 episode series, so we've got 5 more left. And, you know, do me a favor and make sure if you haven't done so already, if you have any comments about whatever we've been learning so far, leave me a comment down below and let me know what you're thinking. Also, if you haven't done so already, check out Live Producers Online. They have a free 30-day trial. What is wrong? Oh! That's better. Also, if you haven't done so already, check out Live Producers Online. They have a free 30-day trial running right now. Garden Sound, play that ad roll.
As with all of the videos in this series, this is partnered with Live Producers Online. They're not paying for this video specifically, but they are paying for the content that I am creating for them over in their courses. I highly suggest that you go down to the description below, check out Live Producers Online. There's a worry-free trial of 30 days. You get access to unlimited courses, answers to your questions via office hours with myself and other producers, feedback on your tracks from those same people, as well as connecting with other producers via the forums. It is one of the largest unofficial forums for Ableton Live. You'll get access to unlimited downloads. If coffee time isn't your thing and you want to get some paid professional support, you can check out the track feedback section. Hey, wait a minute, who's this guy right here? Just kidding, that's me. If you'd like to take private lessons through Live Producers Online, you can absolutely do that. Some of you have already signed up for those private lessons, thank you very much. There's also private lessons that you can take from Ricky Graham, Moldover, Ben Spiker, and Dan Giffen. So guys, once again, highly recommend that you go check it out, free for 30 days.
Also, shout out to Centrotech for sending me this hilarious shirt. Thank you guys. Happy little accidents. In today's video, we're going to be talking about melody. This is going to be called Melody 101. And sort of like the Harmony 101, the idea really isn't to fully teach the entirety of melodic composition to you. It's to get you to understand the basics and to be sort of on the same page. In order to do this accurately, what I'm going to need to do is look at Wikipedia for some definitions. We're going to focus today on just melodic content, just how do we come up with melodies, where do they come from. In order to fully understand the concept of melody, it's super important that you understand the other 5 lessons we've been through so far. So if you haven't caught up with this yet, click the description below to check out all 5 episodes that we've done so far. And last time's episode will be linked at the very end of this video at the end card. Okay, so building on our concepts that we've talked about before, what is melody? What entails melody? I'm not trying to sit here and define what good melody is. I'm just trying to define what melody is. A melody, also tune, voice, or line, is a linear succession of musical tones that the listener perceives as a single entity. Let's stop right there. Unpacking that. What it means is that it's a single source of musical content that is understood to be all one thing. That's important. A melody is not an arpeggiation. It's not it's not the same. Melody has a flow. It has a shape to it. It's like a triangle or a circle or a square. You can see it and hear it. You can perceptualize it as being one thing. It is in itself an assembly or container of musical information, right? Like a packet. It doesn't necessarily get broken up into sections, although it can be. Although is that melody or is that hypermelody? We're not talking about that today. What we are talking about is, well, let's move on and see if we get more clarity from the definition. In its most literal sense, a melody is a combination of pitch and rhythm, while more figuratively, the term can include a succession of other musical elements such as tonal color. So if we're talking about guys who played with tonality in terms of color, like ligeti or ligeti, depending on how your pronunciation is, these guys would play more with tonal clouds, right, or clusters of tones to shape what would be called a melody. Or if we're talking about 12-tone composition or some sort of post-tonal composition, melody could be outside of the diatonic realm into something that really resembles more of just a collection of notes that sound like they go together or are repeated several times, that sort of thing. So the term melody is really loose. I want to focus on diatonic melody because that's what we're building on. So far in this series, we've focused on diatonic, we've focused on tonality, tonal music, so that's what we're going to stick with. I wish my phone wouldn't interrupt recording. Gosh. It may be considered the foreground to the background accompaniment, meaning it might be the thing that is dominant in terms of tonal space. a liner part need not be a foreground melody, meaning that doesn't necessarily have to be the case. You see this a lot with guys like Sibelius, where you have these things called composite melodies, meaning they flow between instruments, right? So in order to analyze the melody properly, we have to look at the entirety, right? You have to look at the whole of maybe several measures of different instrumentation and see, okay, is this figure repeated anywhere else, right? Is it significant? And I think that's really what I want to focus on in terms of melody, is what is the significance of a tonal melody? How significant is it? How do we make it significant? And how do we make it stand out in the listener's ear so they go, okay, there's the melody. Does that make sense? It's sort of like pinstripes on a car. If you want somebody to pay attention to the curvature of the top of a line on a car, for instance, you put stripes on it. You put some sort of something to accent there, some sort of extra flair that necessarily the other elements of the car don't have. Melodies often consist of one or more musical phrases or motifs. We'll come back to that word. And are usually repeated throughout a composition in various forms. Melody may also be described by their melodic motion or the pitches or the intervals between pitches, predominantly conjunct or disjunct, or with further restriction, pitch range, tension, release, continuity, coherence, cadence, shape. There's all sorts of ways for us to define melody, and none of them are technically wrong, but again, what we're focusing on here is sort of the classical Western music theory, diatonic realm. So we're going to look in terms of motivic melody, and then we're going to look at like through composed melody, or something that has more of a shape and form to it, like a longer form melody. We can call this hyper melodies, although that's technically not correct. If you're looking at something that's hyper melodic, you mean something that extends for a very long period of time and sort of overlaps each other. Again, these terms are loose, but I want to convey to you sort of a general understanding of how to say, okay, that's the melody, and to also go, all right, so I'm going to use that and write my own melody. All right, so what are we looking at here? What we're looking at right here is a melody that I've written for a project called Turbo Nerd. And I'll get into that some other time. It's not necessarily the best mix down I've got of this particular song, but it does contain some cool melodic fragments that I'd like to show you. This is a great example of a through composed melody, something that is more akin to an improvisation and less motivic. If we're talking about motivic melody, the best example, the classical example, is Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, which goes dun 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 dun, dun 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 dun. That is a motive, meaning it's a small fragment or melodic idea that's repeated over a bunch of times. So you have I'm out of tone, I'm out of key, oh my god. That is an example of motivic melody. I'm not a huge fan of motivic melody because I think it leaves a lot to be desired, especially in modern contexts. But again, that's a personal preference. That isn't necessarily a correct or wrong thing. So let's go over here to this, and this is going to be sort of like an improvised sort of sounding thing. Let's play through. Alright, so pausing right there. So far what you've seen is one melody, but I'm using a couple of tricks here in order to write it. In terms of tonal and diatonic melodies, which this music right here, although it sounds kind of trappy, is very, very tonal. Meaning it's got chords, it's got a lot of notes, it follows scalar patterns. So let's start off with, what scale are we in? It looks like we're in some sort of D sharp minor, which would probably be more akin to E flat minor. Lots of flats, lots of sharps. Really easy to play on the piano, and there's a reason for that. We've got something that revolves around the tonal center of D sharp minor. And what I'm doing is I'm using notes from that scale, and I'm using a lot of octave inversion, and I'm using a lot of tricks like that in order to make this melody interesting. Really, it's just one simple packet. And again, when we were talking about like an entity or a container, it's really easy to see that the container is this thing right here, which is only 8 bars long, and I've repeated it. in order to make it sound more interesting, I bumped that up an octave and changed some notes around through octave inversion. For instance, this part right here, I'm going to solo this out to make it easier for us to hear. That gets recycled later and turns into this. So that idea of recycling material, that idea of taking something from earlier, which was definitely the melody, and recycling it and changing it up slightly, is using motivic elements, right? Using elements of motivic melody inside of more through composed sort of melodies. Now then the question becomes, Gardner, how do I make a melody? We haven't talked about how to make a melody. And here's the shitty part. I don't really make a melody. I just sort of improvise in my mind what sort of things should go on top of some other chords that I've created, and then I mess with it until it sounds good. So there's a lot of trial and error involved for my particular melodic composition style. And that's why we talked about chord progressions and harmony before this episode, because for me, that's first in the process. So then what makes it foreground material? The answer for me means that it's a little bit more compressed, it's a little bit more gritty, it's more sharp on your ears, it's got more edge to it, typically. It also means that it's more interesting in terms of sound design, and that's so that it grabs your attention. So it's really the most attention-getting part of this, right? So listen again in context. It's got a lot of sustain on it, as opposed to the background material, which there is some some scalar arpeggiated kind of background material going on here. That information, again, is a little bit less squeezed, and it's also lower in terms of balance, in terms of mix, than this other melody, segment, and it's got a less interesting sound design overall, in my opinion, than what's going on in the melody. The melody is more of a sustained sort of guitar-esque line. That's where I'm going to leave off today. I'm going to go ahead and give this project away to everybody that's signed up over on Live Producers Online and go through just a bit more information on what we're looking at here in terms of this project file. But that's going to do it for me today. My name is Garden Sound. As always, this is Lila the Bird. We will see you in the next episode.